Hello and welcome to the Digital Insight, the technology and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Hello and welcome to Digital Insight, the exclusive podcast series from the Interface and CPO Strategy magazines. Today we're joined by Vennard Wright, Chief Information Officer at the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission. Vennard will be telling us all about the technology transformations taking place inside this major utility. Thank you for joining us, Vennard.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you so much for your time. And I guess I'd kind of like to kick off with your appointment to the WSSC in January of 2017, where I believe when you started there was a desire for greater transparency and communication when you joined. How did you go about addressing that?
Sure. So the first thing I did when I got here was really ask a lot of questions. So questions of the team that was already working here in the IT department, but also the senior leadership around WSSC. So I really wanted to understand where the opportunities were around the commission, but also to understand things that we were doing well so that I didn't go back and overcorrect and remove those things that really were viewed as being successes. And based on the conversations that I probably took about a month having, I really put together a strategy for how we were going to go about communicating a little more effectively, being better partners, and based on that, really put a plan in place. So some of the things that I heard were that the morale was pretty low in the IT department. People were rewarded for being heroes. And what I mean by that is there really wasn't a lot of proactiveness. People, whenever something would happen, would spring into action and do a great job of fixing it, but there really wasn't enough planning put into making sure that certain things didn't happen in the first place. But to your question about transparency, what I wanted to make sure we did was communicate what the expectations were around working with the IT department. So making sure that SLAs were assigned to all of the services that we offer in the IT department. Also measuring how well we were performing against those targets and making sure that if we were doing a great job, I wanted everyone to know it, but also if there were areas and opportunities for improvement, that we were communicating those things as well and also showing our progress against those metrics. So that's really what I spent about the first year doing once I got here.
I see. And did that involve kind of new digital architecture and processes?
Yes, it did. It definitely required new processes because in a lot of ways, we were not measuring how well we were performing. So number one, we had to make sure that we documented all of the different services that we offered. Of course, the people that do certain things in the IT department know what they do, but there really is not a lot of transparency across the department into what those services are. So once we documented all of those services, and of course, when you think about an IT department, there are literally hundreds of things that an IT department does. So for all of those hundreds of things, we actually put targets. Here's the response time, here's the resolution time, and here's what you can expect when you ask for this service. So there was that. But in addition to that, I had to make sure that we had things in place that can measure how well we were performing against each one of those targets. So all of that had to be done before we could even start to communicate how well we were performing.
I see. And what kind of initial challenges did you face there?
Well, I think the biggest thing is around people. There was a lot of uncertainty, which tends to happen whenever you have a new leader coming in. So I had to make sure that people were aware that, hey, this is not a gotcha exercise. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that we're performing as well as we can possibly perform. And if there are some areas where you're deficient, it's my job to make sure that you get training. So in addition to making sure that we were performing well, I also wanted to make sure that I focused on the morale of the IT department, because as I said earlier, the morale was pretty low when I got here. So we did lots of different things to make sure that this was a great place to work, not just the commission as a whole, but specifically the IT department. So I put something in place called the Motivation and Morale Committee. And what we do is we make sure we're deliberate about planning at least once a quarter a different event for the IT department. So examples of that, right here, right now in America, we have something very big called March Madness, and that's college basketball, where we put together brackets, and everyone's talking about who their favorite team is, and we put the games on in the conference room. But also every month we celebrate the Employee of the Month, and the Employee of the Month, we actually highlight what they did to earn the Employee of the Month. They get a certificate, a trophy, and they also get a day off. So we also do annual awards, across a number of different categories. And same thing, they get a trophy, and we highlight all of the great things that person has done. And this is not just for employees, but contractors of the IT department as well. So they're also eligible for it. And also once a year, we go to an amusement park. So we spend the first few hours of the day at the amusement park really talking about our initiatives for the coming year. But then after that, they're free to go and enjoy the park. But the whole thing is to make sure that in addition to all of the hard work that the people in the IT department do, we're also having a good time while we're doing it, but also getting to know each other on a personal level. So, and my logic behind that is if you know a person on a fundamental level, you're a lot less likely to stab them in the back. You're also more likely to go the extra mile for them. So that's really the thinking behind doing all of that.
Makes sense. And what about, obviously you've worked for a lot of companies in the private sector. How does that kind of compare working for a utility?
So there are a lot of parallels. So this is a quasi-public organization. So we are governed by the local governments, the two local counties that we serve, Montgomery and Prince George's County in Maryland. So in that way, we still have a lot of the legislative and regulatory red tape, which means that there's a lot of bureaucracy and, a lot of processes that slow things down. But also we are free to make a lot of our own decisions in terms of how we're going to set things up and how we're going to go about contracting. So there are similarities between the way that we operate and the way that the private sector operates, but there are also similarities to how the government operates. So it's kind of in the middle of both of them. So from the perspective of working in the private sector, we were very accountable for results. So we were very results oriented. We wanted to make sure at the end of the day, we were making profit and getting things done quickly. So here we have ratepayers, people that pay us for our service. So from that perspective, we're trying to make sure that we're as efficient as possible and that we're not wasting money. But also in addition to that, we want to make sure that they understand exactly where their money is going, since we are beholden to them, so that since we are obligated to make sure that we're spending their money effectively. So that's also where the transparency comes into play.
And obviously you mentioned the kind of challenges of introducing new processes and technology to people. And I read with interest that you'd said in an article how you'd like to help translate IT speak into a language that everyone can understand. How have you sort of gone about achieving this at the WSSC?
The main way that I did that, to make sure that I'm not speaking in tech speak, which we tend to do in IT, as you know, we always want to believe that we're the smartest person in the room, but that's not always true. So what I try to do is, starting with my service catalog, is I make sure that we're looking at things from the perspective of the business. So I want to make sure in our service catalog, we're looking at things and not saying, for example, if you're looking for additional RAM in your computer, I'll say additional memory. That's just an example. So we get rid of acronyms. We make sure that we're doing things to the least common denominator. So we want to make sure that if there is a person who, say, for example, is 60 years old and working in the commission, that person can also go into the service catalog and get things done and order what it is that they need, because it's that simple to get through. So I try to make sure that any documents that are delivered, any dashboards, make sure that we're engineering to the least common denominator so that everyone across the entire commission understands how to get things done and understands what point it is we're trying to get across. I think that's very important because, like I said, I think that sometimes in IT, we try to overcomplicate things to show how smart we are. But I think that the real brilliance is in making sure that when you do complex things or things that really are complicated, that you can simplify them so that everyone understands.
And sort of stay with the kind of the people aspect of what you're trying to achieve there. How important is talent management and acquisition in implementing technological change?
It's critical. I think that's probably the most important thing, and I think that's one of the things that gets in the way of successful implementations across the board. Making sure that you get the right people, but also when you get the right people, making sure that those people stay, which goes back to what I was saying about making sure this is a great place to work. Because obviously when you have someone who has a critical skill or who is important to a project or an implementation, you want to make sure that person sticks around because they have a lot of other options in other places. So what we do is on an annual basis, we measure how well we're performing in that area. So I send surveys out to all of the employees and contractors and asking very tough questions about areas that we can improve upon. So I want to make sure that managers are doing their jobs as managers, that there are opportunities for advancement. If there are opportunities for training, that we're offering those opportunities for training. But in addition to that, I take it a step further. So, of course, employees are appraised by their managers, but I also want to make sure that managers are appraised by their employees. So I do something called a 360 appraisal, which is where the team members actually say how well their managers are performing. And based on some recurring themes, I want to make sure that I'm having the tough conversations with managers about areas where their team members feel they can do a better job. So that's something that we do to make sure, going back to what I said before, this is a great place to work and that we're also making improvement year over year. Because what I want to do is make sure that when those survey results are put together, we're comparing them to the previous year, and hopefully we have not regressed to a point where we were before.
And how is that going? How do you kind of assess the impact of what you've done so far?
Well, so far we are improving, and in the areas where I see, for example, that there may be a manager who really is not getting with the program, I have to make tough decisions. I'll talk to that manager, and if it still doesn't improve, then I have to make it clear that this probably is not going to be the place for that manager to be working. It's probably time for them to move on, because we have to make sure that we're working together as a team and that team members' morale is exactly where it needs to be. So, there have been cases where if I see that there is a problem manager or someone who is not really embracing the agenda, that person has to move on.
And I believe also diversity and inclusion are very important to you with regards to team building.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And to that point, I try to make sure, and that was something else I noticed when I got here, there really were not a lot of women who were working as managers in the IT department. So I was very deliberate about making sure that the diversity was not just racial or age related, but that it was also gender diversity. As a father of 3 daughters, I'm very conscious of that. So two of my 3 daughters are interested in IT, and I think that it's important for them to see women IT leaders. And one of the biggest things, and something of note, is that here at WSSC, we have the first woman CEO in our 100-year history, which I think is incredible. So to that point, I want to make sure that diversity is also reflected in the IT department. So I'm very deliberate about making sure that for manager positions or positions that are very visible, we're also interviewing women, but not just interviewing women, but giving them an opportunity to move into positions and be successful. I also encourage our women leaders here to be very visible, to go out to give speaking engagements, different things like that to make sure that they have opportunities to advance in their career. And probably at this point, about a year or year and a half ago, I also hosted a session here at WSSC around women IT leadership, where I brought in different CIOs to talk about their challenges in being women IT leaders. That was a very well attended session. So I had the former CIO for NASA, Linda Curitin. I also had the CIO from Prince George's Community College, who was Rhonda Spells-Fentry, and one other woman IT leader from outside WSSC. But in addition to those three, I also had my information and security compliance manager, Christine Gruby, and they participated in a panel discussion where they talked about how they got to their point and some things that were impediments to their career. And hopefully that gave a pretty good feel for what their journey was, but also encouraged other people who were in attendance about ways that they could be more effective in furthering that agenda.
Well, what about the local community in terms of Maryland itself? Are there any sort of initiatives to appoint a certain percentile from the local community at all?
Yes. So as a matter of fact, I do a lot of work with the Maryland Tech Council. So that's one big thing. So with the Maryland Tech Council, we host a series of events where we talk about different challenges or things that the local tech community might be interested in. So the Maryland Tech Council, they work a lot in Montgomery County, but we're also encouraging them to work in Prince George's County as well, which has a very large minority population. So minorities in Prince George's County, there are a lot of companies that are really looking to get off the ground and have not had access to opportunities. So we're trying to encourage partnerships between larger companies and smaller companies that are really looking to learn how to be more effective in pricing and going after opportunities. So Maryland Tech Council has been very good in making sure that they're pushing that agenda, but they also legislate. Well, they push for legislation in our state capital in Annapolis for different initiatives or programs or legislation that actually will help those smaller businesses to be more effective in going after those opportunities and growing and contributing to the local economy.
And in terms of some of the other work that you've been doing at the WSSC, I believe you introduced a new procurement system.
Yes, that's correct. So there are two different things that I did to make sure that we're more effective in terms of our contracting. So the first is we put a contract vehicle in place called Consulting and Technical Services. So Consulting and Technical Services is an independent. It's really based on a model that existed in the federal government for quite a while right now, for quite a while at this point. So it's where we pre-qualify a number of different companies across 7 functional categories. Those functional categories range from everything like project management to data center to cabling and technical writing. And once those companies are pre-qualified, they're given a master contract. And when we identify a new set of opportunities or requirements, we issue a task order proposal request to the companies that are a part of that functional category. And since they're already pre-qualified, it cuts down on the amount of time that it takes for us to go through the full solicitation cycle. So that's one thing. We sped up the time that it takes in order for us to get companies in to be able to partner with us. But the second thing is we put in a procure-to-pay system, and that really streamlined the process from identifying requirements to putting a contract in place. It automated the full workflow. So that helped us to also speed up the time that it takes in order for us to get things done. But we're also always looking for ways to automate and, to be more efficient. So we still have a ways to go, but we've also made a lot of progress. So I think it's important to acknowledge that.
And procurement's kind of undergoing something of a sort of revolution at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. So procurement is one of the areas where, of course, they get a lot of flack for the amount of time that it takes to get things done. But I'm also trying to make sure that there's more visibility into our forecast so that we're looking further out and being more deliberate about the things that we need to get done so that we can give the procurement department and our legal department a heads up that those things are coming. So on a biweekly basis, we meet with the procurement department and say, for example, we're going to need our mobile device management software renewed in 2 months. So we can start to talk about the terms and conditions that might have to be in that agreement so that we can go and get the pricing or whatever it's going to be, whatever needs to be done in order to speed the process up. So like I said, it's definitely a work in progress for us, but we're learning a lot along the way.
I read also that you introduced an enterprise asset management system.
So we're in the second version of that now. So we have a work asset management system that's in place. So that's an Oracle product. We're a very big Oracle shop. And what we're doing right now is putting the next version of that in. So it wasn't as simple as just an upgrade. It's actually a full-blown implementation. So what we did is we worked with the various departments and organizations within the commission to understand their processes, and we're actually building that into the system and making sure that we're standardized across the board. Whereas before, each one of our 4 depots was doing something different. But this is going to allow us to standardize across all of those depots and across all of our departments to make sure that we're doing the same thing across the board, and to make sure that there's also a lot of visibility into the expectations in terms of where things are in the process, and also how we're going to move forward with tracking all of our assets.
Also, I was very interested in a statement I read where you were saying about the challenges you face between balancing strategic goals and innovation against operational or tactical requirements.
Yes. So by nature of what we do, we are, of course, responsible for maintaining the day-to-day IT infrastructure, the network, the computers, phones, data center servers, all of those different things. And it's very easy to just do that, because obviously each person here is responsible for a different part of the IT department. So we're also trying to make sure that we're also moving the commission forward. That we're not just focused on keeping the lights on, that we're also doing some new cool things. So what I've done is I've put something in place called the cadence of accountability. So what that is each department or each manager or team lead is given 2 strategic initiatives that they're responsible on delivering every single year. And what they have to do is they have to report on those things every week, something that they're doing to move that strategic initiative forward. So they have to put together a project plan, and that, of course, the project plan has a lot of different tasks. But what they should be doing is reporting on those tasks that are moving towards the next milestone. And on a monthly basis, we actually go and we take a look at all of the different strategic initiatives to see how well they're doing. So we have a stoplight report that shows red, yellow, or green. Of course, green are things that are on track, yellow are things that are at risk, and red are things that are behind schedule. And those things that are either at risk or behind schedule are the ones that we discuss to see what's really impeding that thing from moving forward, that project from moving forward. So the thinking there is that since we're being deliberate about talking about those strategic initiatives, those things that are really going to change the way that the commission operates, we'll get to a certain point in time and make the progress that we expect, as opposed to just hoping that we're going to move forward on the things, the strategic projects that really are different from operations. So what I've found in the past is that if you don't do that, if you're looking for example, let's say one of our strategic initiatives is identity and access management. So if we just leave it up to the manager to really put together a plan for identity and access management, we'll find a year from now that manager really did not have time to work on it because they're so focused on all of their other day-to-day tasks. So what we're doing right now is making sure that on a weekly basis, the manager that's responsible for identity and access management is talking about what they're doing to move forward with putting that system in place. And we've actually seen that we've had a lot more success operating that way.
And in terms of kind of looking forward, I mean, obviously there's, lots of discussion surrounding artificial intelligence and big data. What big kind of technological advances can you see affecting the utility sector over the next few years?
Yeah, and it's funny that you say artificial intelligence, because I think that is a huge opportunity for us. And as a matter of fact, what we're going to be doing this summer is bringing in 18 interns that are going to be focused on artificial intelligence. So I see that as being an opportunity in that we have a massive amount of data here in our utility. Obviously, we have thousands of miles of pipe that are across the two counties that we're supporting. And we have lots of different assets that have data points attached to them, but we also have internal infrastructure that is also generating data. And all of that means that because of the massive amount of data that we are generating and creating and storing, there really is no way that any human can make sense of all of those different things or make associations across all of the different data sets. So what we're looking at doing is applying artificial intelligence to making sense of those different things. For example, one use case that we can potentially work on this summer with our interns is if someone were to call in and say, hey, I noticed that my water was brown yesterday, we could go to our lab results and see that, okay, based on the lab results that were generated yesterday, there was someone working in that area, and automatically make an association between the call that came from our customer to an event that happened at a certain point in time without someone having to physically go and look through all of those records, through all of those different lab results, and to find that thing that is probably buried within thousands of different records. Of course, artificial intelligence can do that quickly, but we're also looking at applying robotic process automation on top of those manual things so that we can speed it up a little bit more. So I'm hoping to take it even a step further and to be able to do some machine learning, so that once we train the system to go through the different algorithms, they're able to go out and generate new use cases for us, and to be able to be a little smarter about the way that we make those associations across data sets.
So staying within kind of future projects at the WSSC, are there any other exciting sort of projects you're working on at the moment?
Well, the biggest project that we're working on right now, and this has been what's taking the majority of my time, is that we're putting a new billing system in place. So our existing billing system, believe it or not, is on a mainframe. So this system is 30-something years old, and it's worked well for us to this point. But we're moving right now from a 16-tier rate structure with an inclining block to a 4-tier rate structure. But in order for us to move to that new rate structure, we have to move to a new billing system as well. So that has required us to look at everything from our meters all the way to how a person pays their bill once the reads come back from the meters. So we're going live with that system on July 2nd of 2019. So between now and this summer, we're completely focused on making sure that we're successful in standing up that new billing system, keeping in mind the fact that we have 1.8 million customers across 480,000 accounts. So there really is not a lot of room for error.
And obviously with the amount of work you're doing across the commission in various departments, I guess your relationships with vendors is very key.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So what I try to do to make sure that I not only have strong relationships with existing vendors, but also develop new relationships with vendors that might have technologies or practices that we might want to take on here at WSSC. I try to make sure that I get out to conferences periodically to see new trends or to see new technologies. But I also, on Wednesdays, every Wednesday, we meet with a different set of vendors. So before we meet with vendors, we have them answer a series of questions about how what it is that they're offering aligns with something that we're trying to do here at WSSC, so that we can make sure the correct managers are participating in that meeting. So I also try to make sure, in addition to that, I have conversations with those strategic partners that we are doing business with. Examples would be Dell HP, Cisco. So periodically I touch bases with them to make sure that we're taking full advantage of those technologies or services that they offer.
And obviously through that, you must be fostering so many different relationships with so many different companies.
Yes, I am. The challenge there is making sure that you also have time to do the work that you're there to do, because obviously there are thousands of companies, and if you met with all of them, if you responded to every email, if you took every phone call, you would never get anything done. Which is why I try to limit the time that I'm talking to those managers or having those conversations to just one day a week, which really gives me the rest of the week to get things done.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, how big is is your department there at the WSSC?
Yeah, so we have 104 full-time employees. In addition to the 104 full-time employees, we also have about 90 or so more consultants. And the reason we have so many consultants is because we have very large implementations going on. So a lot of those consultants are here to support those implementations.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've answered all the questions I had for you there, unless there was anything else you would like to mention.
Yep. So, I mean, the main thing, I guess a closing point would be something else in addition to all of the technical things that I do, is I try to make sure that I'm as visible as possible. And the reason that I do that is I remember, going back to when I was on Hillary's campaign, I remember thinking, wow, there's no one else on this campaign on the Senate side or on the campaign side that looks like me. There were no other minority males, and I was wondering why. And I realized that we just don't understand how to get to those positions. Whereas in certain cultures, it's important for people to do internships. It's important to make sure that you have strong relationships. From that point, I've made it my mission to deconstruct what it means to be successful. And I've made it a point to make sure that I'm speaking to as many minorities as possible about what it takes in order to get to a certain point. And I want to make sure that they understand the different factors that you have to have, the different things that you have to have in place in order to get to CIO. And the reason I think that's important is because to that point, I'd never seen a Black CIO. I'd never seen someone who looked like me in that position. So I want to make sure that when I go to these schools, when I go to speak to young people, that they see me and they believe that it's possible. I mean, going back to your question around diversity, a lot of times it's not that people don't have access to those positions. They don't know how to they don't know how to get to those positions. So I want to make sure that the formula for success is more understood than it was when I went through. So I'm very lucky to be in the position that I'm in. I've been very fortunate in my career. And like I say, a lot of it really is luck, but I want to make sure that it's not luck for the people that are coming behind me, that they know exactly how to reach that. So I think that's also something that's very important for CIO, to make sure that you're creating a path for those people that are coming behind you.
Vennard Wright, thank you for joining us today on The Digital Insight.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with theinterface.net and cpostrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. And don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/podcast.